American pilots flew converted Nazi aircraft. Part 1. Ghost in Civilian Clothes. Wright Field Air Force Base, Ohio, 1943. The air here was thick not only with the smell of exhaust fumes and hot metal, but also with secrecy. This Air Force Base was the nerve center of American aviation, the place where the boldest engineering ideas were born and died. And it was here, under the cover of darkness, that the most valuable trophies of war, enemy aircraft, arrived. Captain Ethan Kruger, a young but wise beyond his years pilot, stood at the edge of a darkened runway, watching as something rolled out of the giant belly of a C-47 transport that made his blood run cold. Curved wings, a distinctive fuselage, a predatory profile. This was the Messerschmitt Bf 109, one of the Luftwaffe's most fearsome fighters. Every instinct, honed in training combat, screamed enemy. But on the wing and fuselage of this Messerschmitt were not black crosses, but bright white stars on a blue background. Next to it stood its Japanese counterpart, the legendary A6M, also bereft of its bloody rising suns. Beautiful, huh? A hoarse voice called out behind him. Ethan turned. Colonel Harold Hal Wongate stood before him, a legendary figure whose face was lined not so much by age as by overexertion. He smoked a cigar, its tip glowing in the darkness like the eye of a cyclops. Our personal ghosts, sir. I don't understand, Ethan admitted honestly. Why do we need this? Are we going to fight in this? This fascist junk? Wongate chuckled, blowing out a cloud of smoke. Junk? Captain, these are masterpieces of engineering, even if they were created by the devil. This junk has been chasing our boys across the skies of Europe and the Pacific for months. We only know their tactics in theory. It's time to learn them in action. Meet Project Zebra, Captain. And so Ethan Kruger became part of the U.S. Air Force's most secret unit. Their mission was simple and incredibly difficult. Learn to fly captured aircraft, the way their pilots did. Learn all their strengths and weaknesses, all their tricks and stratagems, and then teach them to American fighter pilots. Their hangar was a holy of holies, sealed and guarded by Marines who asked no questions. Inside, the atmosphere was that of a mad scientist's laboratory. Engineers in pressed uniforms stained with machine oil poured over the guts of German and Japanese engines, translating technical manuals with the help of defectors and prisoners of war. Test pilots, the best of the best, climbed into cramped cockpits, getting used to the instruments and controls, which, from an American perspective, were awkward. Ethan's first flight in ABF 109 was a revelation. He was accustomed to the powerful, rock-steady P-47 Thunderbolt. The Messerschmitt was different. It was light, nimble, almost alive. It literally hovered in the air, its flaps allowing for turns one could only dream of in a Thunderbolt. But it had its weaknesses. At high speeds, the controls became heavy, and in a dive, it could bury itself, becoming easy prey. Ethan realized, to defeat the enemy, you first have to think like them. You have to become them. Training battles were the most dangerous part of their job. The Zebras and their captured aircraft fought against conventional American squadrons. The very first exercises produced shocking results. Pilots in P-51 Mustangs and P-38 Lightnings, confident in their superiority, suffered crushing losses. They weren't prepared for the Zero's maneuverability or the Messerschmitt's climb rate. After one such engagement, where Ethan shot down 3 experienced Mustang pilots, one of them approached him, pale with rage and humiliation. What, Kruger? Do you think you're a fascist? He hissed. You fly like them. You think you fly like them. Ethan couldn't think of a response. The boy was right. To learn how to kill a monster, he had begun to become one himself. He caught himself cursing silently in German during combat, learned from technical manuals, and his tactics were becoming increasingly reckless and daring, like those of the German aces. He was piloting a machine designed to kill his friends, and this machine was beginning to change him. One evening, Wongate found him in the hangar, where Ethan sat silently on the wing of his Bf 109. Don't like the game? The colonel asked, his voice losing its usual irony. I like it too well, sir. Ethan replied quietly. I'm beginning to understand them, not just as pilots, as opponents. I'm beginning to respect this machine, and I should be afraid. Wongate nodded, looking at the plane. Fear is a poor guide, Captain. Respect is another matter. They're not animals. They're soldiers, very talented ones, and we must be better. Not with better planes, but with better brains. You and your guys are those brains. You are the ghosts who teach our guys how to survive. Don't forget that. But that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He looked at the starry sky and wondered if somewhere out there, in the skies over Europe, a Luftwaffe pilot in the same cockpit, in the same plane, was perhaps thinking of him. Two ghosts, flying toward each other in pitch darkness, each in a machine destined to kill the other, and the line between them grew thinner with each new sortie. Part 2. Shadow of Doubt 1944. The war was sweeping west, and Project Zebra began to claim its bloody bomb sites. Tactical recommendations developed by the ghosts at Wright Field were distributed to all active units. Don't engage in low-level turning combat with a Zero. Attack a Messerschmitt in a dive. It loses control. Use your superior speed and rate of climb in vertical flight. These simple yet vital tips saved hundreds, if not thousands, of American pilots' lives, but for the Zebras themselves, the war was becoming increasingly absurd and dangerous. Their secret base was moved to a more isolated airfield in Nevada, codenamed Vegas Station. Here, in the desert, under the scorching sun, they honed their skills, becoming increasingly elusive and effective. Their aircraft were constantly evolving. Engineers installed American radios, modified oxygen systems, and sometimes even experimented with weapons, trying to create a hybrid superior to the original Dot. By this time, Ethan Kruger had become one of the most experienced Zebra pilots. He could disassemble and reassemble the landing gear mechanism of ABF 109 blindfolded, and knew the precise vibration in the Zero's engine that immediately aborted the flight. But along with his mastery, his inner ambivalence grew. At night, he had nightmares in which he, piloting his Messerschmitt with its stars, attacked formations of B-17 flying fortresses, and the ones who fell from the damaged aircraft were not nameless Germans, but his friends, with whom he had attended flight school. It was at this time that a new trophy arrived at the base, the brand new Focke-Wulf FW-190, a Jagdvogel hunting bird, as the Germans called it. It was a different class of aircraft, heavier, better armed, and even more dangerous. Ethan's very first familiarization flight almost ended in tragedy. Accustomed to the BF-109's responsiveness, he nearly sent the plane into a spin on a bank turn. The FW-190 demanded a different approach, more aggressive, more direct. It was a club against the Messerschmitt scalpel. "See," said Wangate as Ethan, pale and agitated, reported on the flight. "They're not standing still either. Their tactics are changing, and we must change faster. Our job is to anticipate their next move." One spring morning in 1944, the situation reached its breaking point. An order came through: conduct a series of training exercises with the new P-51 Mustang Squadron, preparing to deploy to England. The weather was unsuitable for flying low clouds, intermittent rain squalls. But orders were orders. Visibility was abysmal, no more than a couple of miles. Ethan led his flock, 3 converted aircraft, his own BF-109, A0, and a new FW-190. They were facing a quartet of Mustangs. The battle was a chaotic chase in the gray haze, with the planes briefly emerging from the clouds only to disappear back into them. The radio was full of excited shouts, warnings, and laughter. Everyone was young and confident in their skills. Ethan shot down one of the Mustangs and, caught up in the pursuit of the second, briefly lost his bearings. He broke through the cloud cover and found himself above a featureless sea of gray fluff, stretching to the horizon. His instruments showed he was somewhere on the border of Nevada and California. The radio was silent interference from thunderstorms. He was alone in his German fighter, lost in the skies above his own country. That's when he saw them. A column of vehicles appeared from below, through a gap in the clouds. Trucks, jeeps. Ethan, acting on autopilot, lowered his altitude to identify them. He was sure they were friendly forces, perhaps conducting some kind of training exercise. But his plane, even with its American stars, was unmistakable. To any soldier on the ground, the silhouette of ABF 109 was as familiar and hostile as a swastika. He flew low over the convoy, still trying to get his bearings. And then the world exploded. Anti-aircraft guns struck from the ground, a few seconds late, but with fierce determination. A black cloud of explosions flared next to his wing. These weren't training rounds. This was a live salvo. "Ceasefire. I'm friendly. Zebra 1. He shouted into the radio, but all he heard was the crackle of static. Adrenaline rushed to his head. All his training, all his doubts instantly evaporated, giving way to an ancient, animalistic survival instinct. He jerked the stick back, escaping into the clouds. executing the anti-aircraft maneuver he'd learned from studying German pilots' reports. His heart pounded. He was under attack from his own people. His own country was trying to kill him. A few minutes later, clear of danger, he picked up a clear frequency and contacted base. Von Gate's voice in the headphones was cold as steel. Return immediately, Zebra 1, radio silence. Understood, understood, Ethan gasped. It later emerged that he had accidentally flown over an anti-aircraft battery, guarding a secret ammunition depot. The soldiers, seeing the Messerschmitt, ignored its identification and opened fire. The incident was hushed up at the highest levels. Officially, it was a misidentification error during training. Unofficially, Von Gate reprimanded everyone involved, reminding them of the top-secret nature of their mission. For Ethan, this incident was a turning point. He no longer felt like just a pilot playing a role. He had become a ghost in the most literal sense of being unseen and unacknowledged by his own, and hated by outsiders. He sat in the cockpit of his plane, running his hand over the cold metal with the American star, and thought about how this star wasn't protection for him, but merely a disguise, concealing his true, dangerous nature. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and the pack had begun to sense something in him that wasn't theirs. Part 3. The Edge Summer of 1944. The Allies landed in Normandy, and the war in Europe entered its final phase. Project Zebra was working at full capacity. Now their primary task was not only training their own, but also analyzing the latest German tactics based on desperation. Reports were coming in of Me-260 to jets and V-1 rockets being used. The Zebra studied everything they could get their hands on, trying to find vulnerabilities in these wonder weapons. Ethan Kruger had become withdrawn and silent. The incident with the anti-aircraft fire had left a deep scar on him. He saw the fear and hatred in the eyes of those soldiers on the ground, and that look haunted him. He flew masterfully, but without his former passion. His movements in the cockpit had become mechanical, precise, but soulless. He was the perfect instrument, and instruments don't ask questions. It was at that moment that an order came that called their entire existence into question. Intelligence intercepted data about the transfer of the elite German fighter squadron Molders to an airfield in France recently recaptured from the Allies. The Germans, in their retreat, had abandoned several damaged but potentially repairable aircraft there. Zebra's mission was a gamble to the point of madness. Steal one of these aircraft and fly it to Allied territory for study. That's suicide, sir, Ethan stated coldly at the briefing. We're flying American planes with American markings behind enemy lines, where our own will shoot us down at the first sight of our silhouette, and the Germans will fire on us because they see the stars. Not exactly. Von Gate unfolded the map. You won't be flying your own planes. You'll be flying a C-47 as part of a routine transport mission. Your Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs will be waiting for you at Broadmoor Airfield in England. From there, you'll make one quick dash across the English Channel. We'll provide fighter cover. Your task is to land on the captured airfield, select the best preserved example, start it up, and escape before the Germans come to their senses. The plan was insane, but there was logic to the madness. Who else but the Zebras could immediately, in combat, sort out someone else's damaged aircraft and get it airborne? The landing at Broadmoor Airfield was a return to the real world of war for Ethan. After the sterile cleanliness of Nevada, everything here was permeated with its smell, exhaust fumes, gunpowder, damp earth, and fear. Rows of real Spitfires and Mustangs bearing victory markings stood in the parking lots. The pilots, young, tired, and bright-eyed, regarded their arriving Zebra group as a curiosity. They didn't know the details, but rumors were circulating. Their target airfield was near the coast. When their C-47 landed in a meadow a few miles away, Ethan and the other Zebra pilots set off in jeeps. What they saw was a vision of the apocalypse. The airfield was pockmarked with craters, and the charred hulks of aircraft, both German and Allied, strewn everywhere. But in a distant hangar, half destroyed, they found what they had come for: a relatively intact Messerschmitt Bf 109G. With a punctured canopy, but apparently a functioning engine, the work began in earnest. They were like surgeons on the battlefield. While the two pilots fought off the scattered groups of German soldiers holed up in the rubble, Ethan and the mechanic who had arrived with them tried to revive the machine. They worked in the darkness by the light of flashlights, their fingers sliding over familiar levers and switches. After an hour, they managed to get the engine started. It sneezed, spitting out a cloud of black smoke, and rumbled, filling the hangar with a wow. Victorious roar. Ethan squeezed into the cockpit, removing the body of the dead German pilot, which they had found nearby. The smell of death, mixed with gasoline and oil, hung in the air. He was in his element again, in the cockpit of an enemy plane, in enemy territory. But this time, it was for real. At that moment, gunfire was heard outside. The Germans were counterattacking. The mechanic shouted that they were running late. Get out. Ethan shouted, I'll distract them. He didn't think. He acted. Taxiing out of the hangar onto the rutted field, he gave it full throttle. The Bf-109, with its characteristic howl, took off, bouncing over the bumps. The Germans, seeing the Messerschmitt taking off, stopped firing for a second, thinking it was their own. That second was enough for the remaining Zebras to retreat to their jeeps. Ethan lifted off and circled the airfield. He saw German soldiers running below, saw the flashes of gunfire. And then he was attacked. From the west, from the sea, a pair of Spitfires dived at him, British. They saw the Messerschmitt taking off from a German airfield and, without hesitation, went on the attack. For Ethan, the world shrank to the cockpit. He was back in his role. He was a German ace, being attacked by the Allies. He jerked the stick back, veering toward the zenith, executing the same maneuver he'd practiced hundreds of times in Nevada. The Spitfires streaked past. He knew their weak spots. He knew he had the advantage in the turn. He could outshoot them. He was better. But at that moment, he saw stains on his plane's wing. Not paint. Blood. The blood of that German pilot. And he realized he couldn't. He couldn't shoot. Those guys in the Spitfires were his. They were fighting for his country, for his ideals. By shooting at them, even with blanks, he would betray everything he had become a Zebra for. He abruptly cut the throttle and lowered the landing gear and flaps the universal sign of surrender. Then, maneuvering, he began to rock his wings. The Spitfires, stunned by the Messerschmitt's behavior, ceased firing and took up a position to the side, guiding him in for a landing. 10 minutes later, he landed the captured Bf-109 at the nearest Allied airfield, rising to meet the muzzles of dozens of machine guns. When he shut down the engine and opened the canopy, he was greeted by the pale, frightened faces of British soldiers. He slowly raised his hands. An American pilot, he said, his voice hoarse and tired. Captain Ethan Kruger. Project Zebra. Later, when everything was explained, he was greeted as a hero. He had delivered a priceless trophy. But for Ethan, the war ended the moment he decided not to shoot. He crossed the final line. He proved to himself that, even as a ghost, he remained human. He used the knowledge he gained as an enemy not to kill, but to save those he was called to protect. Project Zebra was declassified only decades later. But for Ethan Kruger, it will forever remain a time when he flew on the razor's edge between life and death, between friend and foe, between his true self and the mask he was forced to wear. And he understood the most important truth. The most dangerous battle takes place not in the sky, but in the soul of a person, and the main victory is to be able to remain yourself, even pretending to be someone else.